You missed a spot. The voice, sharp and cold as shattered ice, sliced through the cavernous silence of the marble foyer. Elena Vance, on her hands and knees, paused her scrubbing. Every muscle in her body tensed. She looked up, her gaze traveling the length of Isabel Blackwood's silk-clad legs to the woman's perfectly sculpted, disdainful face. Isabel pointed a manicured finger, tipped in blood-red lacquer, toward a section of tile that was already gleaming under the recessed lighting. It was a section Elena had polished not 5 minutes ago. There, Isabel sneered, her voice dripping with a cruel satisfaction that had become all too familiar in the 3 weeks Elena had worked in this palatial prison. Are you blind as well as incompetent? Elena's jaw tightened, but she kept her expression neutral, her voice steady. My apologies, Mrs. Blackwood. I will attend to it immediately. She dipped her cloth back into the bucket, the faint scent of lemon and ammonia filling the air. She refused to give this woman the satisfaction of a reaction. She needed this job. Her younger sister, Lily, was depending on it. The soft click of Isabel's heels on the marble was the only warning before a stiletto-clad foot deliberately kicked the bucket. Soapy water sloshed across the pristine floor, soaking the hem of Elena's simple gray uniform. Oops, Isabel said, her lips curling into a smug smile. How clumsy of me. Now you have a real mess to clean up. Do it again. Properly this time, from the shadowed archway of his study, Julian Blackwood watched, unseen. He had come home early, a migraine pounding behind his eyes, seeking the quiet solitude of his library. Instead, he had walked into this quiet, vicious little drama. He saw the new maid, a young woman whose name he didn't even know, absorb the humiliation with a stillness that was more powerful than any outburst. He saw her chin lift, her back straighten, as if she were wearing armor instead of a servant's uniform. And he saw his wife, Isabel, the woman he had married in a fog of grief and loneliness after his parents' death, looking down at Elena with an expression of pure, unadulterated contempt. In that moment, watching the quiet dignity of the maid clash with the ugly cruelty of his wife, Julian felt a profound and sickening shame. He had built an empire of steel and glass, but his own home was rotten from the inside. He had allowed it to be. He had been absent, disconnected, a ghost in his own life. But as he watched Elena wring out her cloth and begin the painstaking task of cleaning up the deliberate spill, something inside him shifted. A cold, hard resolve began to crystallize in the hollow space where his heart used to be. Isabel had just made the biggest mistake of her life. She had shown him the ugliness he had chosen to ignore, and in doing so, she had sealed her own fate. For the first time in years, Julian Blackwood was truly seeing, and what he saw would change everything. He remained in the shadows, a silent observer. The incident was a catalyst, a sharp, painful awakening from a long slumber of indifference. For years, his life had been a series of sterile boardrooms, lonely penthouse suites, and hollow social engagements with Isabel at his side. A beautiful, cold accessory. He had mistaken her polish for substance, her ambition for passion. Now he saw it for what it was, a brittle, grasping avarice. He watched Elena work. She did not rush. Her movements were efficient, deliberate, imbued with a grace that seemed entirely out of place for such a menial task. She cleaned the new mess, then went back to the original, imaginary spot Isabel had pointed out and polished it until the reflection was as clear as a mirror. She never once looked toward Isabel, who had grown bored and drifted away to make a phone call, her laughter echoing unervingly through the grand hall. When Elena was finished, she stood, collected her bucket, and walked toward the staff quarters with her back ramrod straight. She was a queen in a pauper's clothes. Julian felt an unfamiliar emotion stir within him, a potent mix of admiration and protective anger. Who was this woman? What quiet strength allowed her to endure such petty tyranny without breaking? He retreated into his study, the migraine forgotten, replaced by a thrumming new purpose. He opened his laptop, not to review quarterly earnings or stock projections, but to access the personnel files from the agency that staffed his home. Her name was Elena Vance, 26 years old. Previous employment: a string of cleaning jobs and waitress positions. No family listed, except for an emergency contact, a younger sister named Lily Vance. The file was sparse, clinical. It told him nothing of the woman he had just witnessed. He then did something he hadn't done in years. He accessed the mansion's security system. It was a state-of-the-art network he'd had installed after a security scare, with cameras covering nearly every common area. He had always found it intrusive, a symptom of the gilded cage his life had become. Now it was a tool. He rewound the footage, watching the scene in the foyer again, this time in grainy black and white. The cruelty was even more stark without the distraction of color. Isabel's deliberate kick. Elena's flinch, so subtle it was almost missed. The set of her jaw. It was all there, a silent movie of injustice. He spent the next hour scrolling back through the archives of the past 3 weeks, since Elena had been hired. Pattern emerged, ugly and undeniable. It was a campaign of psychological warfare. Isabel accidentally spilling wine on a freshly laundered tablecloth Elena had just set. Isabel accusing Elena of misplacing a pair of earrings, only to find them in her own jewelry box an hour later with a dismissive wave. Isabel speaking to her in a tone usually reserved for a misbehaving pet. And through it all, Elena remained a portrait of composure. She was unfailingly polite, meticulously thorough in her work, and utterly impenetrable. Julian felt a growing sense of complicity. This was happening under his roof. His wealth, his name, his power were the very things that enabled Isabel's behavior. He was the king of this cold, marble castle, and he had allowed a tyrant to torment its most vulnerable citizen. The shame burned hotter. He decided then and there that simply firing Isabel's chosen target was not the answer. That would be rewarding the bully and punishing the victim. No, this required a deeper understanding. He needed to know why Elena endured it. He needed to understand the source of her strength. And he needed to uncover the true depth of his wife's malice. His investigation had begun. He would no longer be a ghost in his own home. He would become its silent judge. Over the next few days, Julian altered his routine. He began working from his home study, citing a desire to focus on a new acquisition. Isabel was pleased. His presence meant she could more easily ask for funds for her various charity committees and shopping excursions. She was oblivious to his true purpose. From his desk, he had a clear view of the main hallway and the grand staircase. He left his door slightly ajar, listening to the rhythms of the house he had long ignored. He saw Elena move through the spaces with a quiet efficiency that was almost invisible. She was a ghost of a different sort, one who polished and cleaned and restored order, leaving no trace of herself behind, only a sense of calm. He learned that she often skipped her lunch break, using the time to read a thick, worn textbook in a secluded corner of the staff lounge. He managed to glimpse the cover one afternoon. Gray's Anatomy. It was a medical textbook. This was the first crack in the mystery of Elena Vance. Why would a maid be studying anatomy? The question intrigued him, adding a new layer to the woman he was observing. He arranged a chance encounter. One afternoon, as she was dusting the bookshelves in the library, he entered, feigning a search for a specific volume. "Excuse me," he said, his voice startling her. She turned, her eyes wide for a fraction of a second before her professional mask slipped back into place. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm sorry. Am I in your way?" "Not at all," he said, his tone softer than he intended. "I was just looking for a book on Roman architecture." He gestured vaguely at a shelf. "I see you're being very thorough." It was a clumsy opening, but it was the best he could manage. His people skills had atrophied from years of disuse. "It is my job, sir," she replied simply, her gaze direct and clear. There was no artifice in her, no fawning deference. It was unsettling and refreshing. "I saw you reading earlier," he ventured, stepping closer. "Anatomy, wasn't it? A difficult subject, a flicker of something. Was it panic? Embarrassment?" Crossed her face before she composed herself. "I find it interesting," she said evasively, turning back to her dusting. The conversation was over. She had shut him out. But he had learned something important. Her past was a secret she guarded closely. Later that day, he had his private investigator, a discreet man named Harrison, run a deeper background check on Elena Vance. The report came back that evening and Julian read it in the deepening twilight of his study. The truth was a quiet tragedy. Elena had been a top student in a prestigious nursing program on a full scholarship. But in her final year, her younger sister Lily had been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disorder that required constant, expensive care. Their parents were gone, leaving Elena as Lily's sole guardian. The medical bills piled up. The demands of care became overwhelming. Elena had been forced to drop out of school, sacrificing her future to ensure her sister had one. She took on any job she could find, working tirelessly to afford the treatments that kept Lily stable. The pieces clicked into place. Her diligence, her resilience, her quiet dignity. It was all forged in the crucible of love and sacrifice. She wasn't just a maid. She was a warrior, fighting a silent battle every single day. And his wife, in her ignorant cruelty, was kicking at the shins of a giant. That night, Isabel swept into his study, smelling of expensive perfume and champagne. "Darling," she purred, draping herself over his chair. "The annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala is next month. As chairwoman, I simply must have a new gown. And a new necklace. The Blackwood name must shine brightest." After all, she spoke of charity while actively tormenting a young woman who had given up everything for family. The hypocrisy was so profound, so nauseating, that Julian had to physically restrain himself from recoiling. He simply nodded, his mind racing. "Of course, my dear," he said, his voice a low monotone. "Whatever you feel is necessary," as she left. Pleased with her easy victory, Julian looked back at Elena's file. The gala, public event. An idea, cold and sharp as a shard of ice, began to form in his mind. Public stage was needed, not for charity but for justice. Julian knew he needed to get closer to Elena, to earn a measure of her trust. Simple observation was no longer enough. He needed to understand her, not as a subject of his investigation, but as a person. His opportunity came a few days later. He overheard Isabel berating Elena in the kitchen, the accusation this time being that a silver serving spoon had gone missing. "They're part of a set, you fool." Isabel's voice was shrill. "My great-grandmother brought that silver from Europe. It's irreplaceable. I know you took it. People like you are all the same thieves." Just waiting for a chance, Elena stood perfectly still, her hands clasped behind her back. "I assure you, Mrs. Blackwood, I did not take your spoon. I can empty my pockets and my bag if you wish. Don't be absurd. You've probably already pawned it," Isabel scoffed. "I'm docking your pay for this week. Perhaps that will teach you to keep your hands to yourself." Isabel stormed out, leaving Elena alone in the cavernous, silent kitchen. Julian waited a moment before entering, holding the very spoon in question. He'd found it earlier that morning, tucked into a drawer in the dining room sideboard, where Isabel had likely misplaced it during a frantic search for matching napkins the night before. He held it out to Elena. "I believe this is what she was looking for," he said quietly. Elena looked from the spoon to his face, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, she said nothing. The silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the industrial-sized refrigerator. "Thank you, sir," she finally whispered, her voice tight with emotion she refused to show. She didn't take the spoon. "You should give it to her," she said. "If I do, she will only accuse me of finding it and hiding it to make her look foolish." Julian recognized the weary logic of someone accustomed to navigating a no-win situation. He set the spoon down on the polished granite countertop. "I'm sorry," he said, and the words felt inadequate, pathetic. For her behavior. Unacceptable. Elena finally met his eyes, and for the first time, he saw past the resilient armor to the exhaustion beneath. "You don't have to apologize for her, Mr. Blackwood. I'm just here to do my job. But it shouldn't be part of your job to endure that," he insisted, a genuine heat in his voice. "No one should be treated that way." A small, sad smile touched her lips. "The world isn't always fair, sir. It should be," he replied, more to himself than to her. He decided to take a risk. "I know about your sister, Lily," he said gently. Her composure finally cracked. Her eyes widened in alarm, her body stiffening. "How? How do you know about her?" "I had my people look into your background," he admitted, expecting anger. "I apologize for the invasion of privacy, but after what I witnessed, I needed to understand." "Understand what?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Why I let your wife walk all over me. Why I stay and take it. It's because I have no choice, Mr. Blackwood. My sister's life depends on this paycheck, on the insurance this job provides. So I swallow my pride, I bite my tongue, and I scrub your floors, and I let her call me a thief because Lily is more important than my feelings." The words tumbled out, a torrent of frustration and pain she had held back for so long. He saw tears glistening in her eyes, tears she furiously refused to let fall. He felt a powerful urge to fix it, to write a check and solve all her problems. But he knew instinctively that she would refuse. Her pride, the very thing she claimed to swallow, was the core of her strength. "I'm not offering pity, Elena," he said, using her first name for the first time. "I'm offering respect. What you're doing for your sister is remarkable." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I have resources. I can get her the best doctors, access to clinical trials. Anything she needs. No strings attached." She stared at him, her expression a mixture of suspicion and desperate hope. "Why would you do that?" "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "And because I want to help." She shook her head, the tears finally winning, tracing silent paths down her cheeks. "I can't accept," she whispered. "I have to do this myself." He had anticipated this, and it only deepened his admiration. "Then let me help in a different way," he countered. "My family's foundation. It offers grants for medical hardship. It's an official program. You can apply. It's all anonymous, judged by a board. It wouldn't be a handout. It would be something you earned through your application." He was, of course, the head of that board, but she didn't need to know that. He saw the conflict in her eyes, the hope warring with the pride. I'll think about it," she said, her voice barely audible. It was more than he could have hoped for. It was a beginning. A fragile bridge of trust was being built, spanning the vast chasm between their two worlds. The application for the grant was a pretense, a way for Julian to funnel resources to Lily's care without wounding Elena's pride. He approved it himself within hours of his assistant flagging the submission. But his investigation into Isabel took a much darker turn. He had assumed her cruelty was born of simple boredom and arrogance. The truth was far more venomous. Harrison, his investigator, uncovered a trail of debt and deceit that stunned even Julian's jaded sensibilities. Isabel was a compulsive gambler. Not just casual bets, but high-stakes, backroom games with dangerous people. She had hemorrhaged money for years, hiding it from him with a complex web of lies, secret credit cards, and loans from wealthy, equally vapid friends. The household accounts, which she managed, were her personal slush fund. The things she accused staff of stealing, the silver spoon, the earrings, a cashmere throw, were items she had pawned herself to cover her losses. She fired the staff members to create a scapegoat and hide the evidence. Elena was not her first victim. She was just the latest in a line of innocent people whose livelihoods had been destroyed to feed Isabel's addiction. This wasn't just petty malice. It was calculated criminal fraud. The discovery sickened Julian to his core. The woman sleeping in his bed, wearing his name, was a predator. The upcoming charity gala was her biggest project yet. She had been leveraging her position as chairwoman, skimming from vendor payments and donations, in a desperate attempt to pay off a particularly menacing loan shark who was growing impatient. The public humiliation of Elena was designed to be more than just a cruel spectacle. It was a distraction. While everyone was focused on the thieving maid, Isabel planned to manipulate the final event finances to cover her largest theft to date. The centerpiece of her plan was a magnificent diamond and sapphire necklace, a Blackwood family heirloom that had belonged to Julian's mother. It was his most cherished memento of her, and Isabel knew it. Her plan, as pieced together by Harrison's intel, was audacious in its cruelty. She would wear the necklace to the gala, then pretend it was stolen during the event. She would have already planted it in Elena's meager belongings back at the mansion. She would cause a scene, have Elena arrested in front of the city's elite, and in the ensuing chaos, the financial discrepancies would go unnoticed. The insurance payout for the stolen necklace would clear her debts. She would destroy an innocent woman and desecrate the memory of his mother in one fell swoop. Julian sat in his study, the investigator's report open on his desk, the cold light of the monitor illuminating his grim face. The room felt like a tomb. He felt a rage so pure and cold it was almost serene. He had thought he was dealing with a spoiled narcissist. He was dealing with a sociopath. His initial plan to simply expose her at the gala now felt insufficient. An eye for an eye was not enough. This required a complete and total dismantling of her entire world. She wanted a public stage? He would give her one. She wanted a spectacle? He would orchestrate a masterpiece of ruin. He looked at the picture of his mother on his desk, her warm smile a stark contrast to the coldness that had infested his life. He thought of Elena, scrubbing floors on her hands and knees to save her sister, her quiet dignity a beacon in the darkness. The path forward was clear. He would not just be the judge. He would be the executioner. He picked up the phone and dialed Harrison. "I have a new set of instructions," he said, his voice devoid of all emotion. "It's time to set the stage." The choice was no longer a choice. It was a moral imperative. Julian could have handled this quietly. He could have confronted Isabel in private, divorced her, and absorbed the financial losses. It would have been the clean, simple, and emotionally distant path, the path the old Julian would have taken. But the old Julian was gone, burned away by the acid of his wife's deceit and tempered by the quiet strength of his maid. To act in secret would be a betrayal of everything Elena represented. It would mean her name would never be truly cleared, that a shadow of suspicion might always linger. It would mean Isabel would escape public accountability, free to slither away and inflict her poison on others. Justice, he realized, was not a private matter. Like a wound, it needed air and light to truly heal. His commitment to this public reckoning solidified his transformation. He was no longer a passive observer of his own life. He was an active participant, a force for change. He began to move his own pieces across the board with a precision and ruthlessness he normally reserved for corporate takeovers. He had Harrison gather irrefutable evidence: video surveillance from the pawn shops where Isabel had sold family silver, sworn affidavits from the staff she had previously fired under false pretenses, and a detailed forensic accounting of the charity's finances that laid her embezzlement bare. He also identified Isabel's primary creditor, a notoriously unforgiving loan shark named Silas the Viper Vance, no relation to Elena, a cruel irony that was not lost on Julian. Julian contacted Silas through a secure channel, not to threaten him, but to make him an offer. He would personally guarantee Isabel's debt, plus a substantial premium, on two conditions. First, Silas and his associates would attend the Blackwood Charity Gala as his personal guests. Second, they would do absolutely nothing until Julian gave the signal. Silas, intrigued by the billionaire's unorthodox methods and the promise of a massive payday, readily agreed. Next, Julian approached Elena. He found her in the garden, tending to his mother's rose bushes, a task she had taken upon herself. The afternoon sun cast a warm glow on her, and for a moment, he was struck by how much she belonged there, more than Isabel ever had. "Elena," he began, his voice serious, "I need to ask you for your trust," he explained, in broad strokes, that he was aware of Isabel's animosity, and that he had reason to believe she was planning something to harm her at the gala. He did not reveal the full extent of the frame-up. He didn't want to frighten her, but he made it clear that a confrontation was coming. "I need you to work at the event," he said. "I know it's the last thing you want to do, but it's essential. I will be there. I will not let anything happen to you. I give you my word." She searched his face, her intelligent eyes probing for any sign of deceit. She saw only a grim, unwavering resolve. She had seen his kindness, his quiet support for her sister. She had seen the change in him. Where there was once a distant, hollow man, there was now someone of substance, of purpose. She didn't understand his plan, but she had come to trust the man. "Okay," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I trust you." Julian, hearing her say his first name, sent an unexpected jolt through him. It was a confirmation, a bond forged. The final piece of his plan was the necklace itself. He went to the vault, the cold steel door swinging open to reveal the glittering treasure. He took out the case containing his mother's necklace. It was even more beautiful than he remembered, the sapphires as deep and blue as a twilight sky. With a heavy heart, he removed the genuine article and replaced it with a flawless, museum-quality replica he had commissioned weeks ago. The real necklace he placed in a secure deposit box. The replica would be the bait. The stage was set. The actors were in place. The night of the gala would not be a celebration of charity, but a theater of consequences. The night of the Blackwood Charity Gala arrived, cloaking the city in a velvet darkness pricked by the distant stars. The Blackwood estate was ablaze with light, a beacon of wealth and power. Valets in crisp uniforms whisked away luxury cars while guests in designer gowns and bespoke tuxedos ascended the grand stone steps, their laughter echoing in the cool night air. Inside, the ballroom was a symphony of crystal, silver, and flowers. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Isabel was in her element, a radiant queen holding court. She wore a shimmering, backless gown of silver silk, and around her neck, the replica of the Blackwood necklace glittered, catching the light with every turn of her head. She was breathtakingly beautiful and utterly soulless. Julian stood by her side, playing the part of the proud, supportive husband. He was a mask of calm civility, but beneath the surface, his nerves were coiled tight. He watched her greet politicians, CEOs, and socialites, her smile never faltering, her charm a weapon she wielded with expert precision. He saw Silas Vance and his men enter, their brutish forms incongruous in their ill-fitting tuxedos. They took a position at a corner table, their eyes scanning the crowd, waiting. Elena moved through the event with the other catering staff, her simple black uniform a stark contrast to the opulent attire of the guests. She was focused and professional, refilling champagne flutes and offering canapés, but Julian could see the tension in the set of her shoulders. Their eyes met once across the crowded room, and he gave her a subtle, reassuring nod. The moment Isabel had been waiting for came just before the main auction. She let out a theatrical gasp, her hand flying to her throat. "My necklace!" she cried, her voice pitched to carry across the suddenly silent room. "It's gone." Panic, feigned and perfectly executed, contorted her features. "Someone has stolen my necklace." The room erupted in murmurs. Security guards immediately began to move toward the exits. Julian stepped forward, playing his part. "Isabel, calm down. Are you sure?" "Of course I'm sure," she shrieked, turning on him. "It was here a moment ago. This is a disaster." She scanned the room, her eyes landing, as if by chance, on Elena, who was standing near the stage, holding a tray of empty glasses. Isabel's eyes narrowed. She pointed a trembling, accusatory finger. "It was her," she declared, her voice ringing with false conviction. "The maid. I saw her lurking near me all evening. She took it." Every head in the room swiveled to stare at Elena. She froze, the tray in her hands rattling slightly. The weight of 100 pairs of eyes felt like a physical blow. She felt the blood drain from her face, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. This was the trap Julian had warned her about. 2 security guards started toward her, their faces grim. She looked desperately toward Julian, her trust in him the only thing keeping her from collapsing. It felt like her world was ending, that the lie was going to swallow her whole. Isabel smiled, a thin, triumphant slash in her perfect face. She had won. The maid would be arrested, the perfect diversion. Her problems were about to be solved. It was her masterpiece of cruelty, playing out exactly as she had planned. The guards reached Elena, one placing a firm hand on her arm. "Ma'am," "You'll have to come with us." Elena flinched, a small, wounded sound escaping her lips. It seemed, for one terrible moment, that Julian's promise had been empty, that all was lost. "Stop!" The word was not shouted, but it cut through the ballroom with the authority of a thunderclap. Every eye snapped from Elena to Julian. He had stepped forward, his expression like granite. He walked calmly toward the security guards, his presence commanding the space around him. "Let her go," he said, his voice low and dangerous. The guard hesitated, looking from the billionaire who signed his paychecks to the billionaire's hysterical wife. "But sir," Mrs. Blackwood said. "I know what my wife said," Julian interrupted, his cold gaze finally settling on Isabel. "And she is mistaken." Isabel's triumphant smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. "Julian, what are you doing? She's a thief. Arrest her." "There will be no arrest," Julian announced, turning to address the captivated audience. "Because there has been no theft." He gestured to the large screens on either side of the stage, which moments before had been displaying the logos of the gala's corporate sponsors. "If you would all direct your attention to the screens." With a click of a small remote in his hand, the screens came to life. The first image was a grainy, time-stamped video from a pawn shop across town. It showed Isabel, disguised in a scarf and sunglasses, sliding a silver serving spoon, the one she had accused Elena of stealing, across the counter to a pawnbroker. The crowd gasped. Isabel's face went white. Another video played. Isabel at a different shop, pawning a cashmere throw. Then another, showing her selling the earrings she had found in her jewelry box. Julian's voice narrated the damning evidence. "For the past year, my wife has been systematically stealing from our home, pawning priceless family heirlooms, and then firing the innocent staff she framed for her crimes." He clicked the remote again. Now, the screens displayed forensic accounting spreadsheets, highlighted in red to show the flow of money from the charity's accounts into offshore accounts linked to high-stakes gambling sites. "She has not only been stealing from my family," Julian continued, his voice resonating with cold fury, "but from the sick children this gala is meant to support." Isabel began to tremble, her eyes darting around the room, searching for an escape. But there was none. She was trapped in the spotlight of her own making. "And tonight," Julian's voice dropped, becoming almost a whisper, yet carrying to every corner of the silent room. She intended to play her final card. The screen changed again. It was security footage from their bedroom, filmed just that afternoon. It showed Isabel opening the jewelry case, taking out the necklace, and then walking down the hall to the staff quarters. The camera angle from the hallway showed her slipping the necklace into the side pocket of Elena's simple cloth bag. A collective, horrified gasp swept through the ballroom. The frame-up was undeniable, laid bare for all to see. "She planted the necklace on an innocent woman," Julian stated, his eyes locking with Isabel's. "A woman who has shown more integrity and honor in one day than my wife has shown in her entire life." He turned to Elena, who was standing frozen, tears streaming down her face. Tears not of fear, but of vindication. "Elena Vance is the most decent human being I have ever met, and I apologize to her for what she has endured in my home." He then turned his gaze to the corner table where Silas Vance sat, watching the proceedings with a predatory grin. "Isabel did all of this to pay off her gambling debts to some very dangerous people. But don't worry," Julian said, his voice laced with ice as he looked back at his wife. "I've taken care of it. Your creditors are here tonight." As my guests on cue, Silas and his men stood up. The color drained completely from Isabel's face. She looked like a ghost, a broken doll. Her public humiliation was absolute. Her social standing, her reputation, her entire world, annihilated in the space of 5 minutes. The takedown was complete. The aftermath was swift and brutal. As Silas Vance and his men began to move toward a now catatonic Isabel, Julian raised a hand. "That won't be necessary, Silas," he said calmly. "Our deal is complete. The money has been transferred." He then nodded to the 2 security guards who had been about to arrest Elena. "However, I believe the police would be very interested in speaking with Mrs. Blackwood about felony theft, fraud, and embezzlement." The guards, now understanding the true nature of the situation, changed course. They moved past Elena and took a stunned Isabel by each arm. The clicking of handcuffs echoed in the silent ballroom, a final, percussive end to her reign of cruelty. As they led her away, her silver gown shimmering under the chandeliers, she shot Julian a look of pure, venomous hatred. He met her gaze without flinching, his expression one of cold, final pity. She had sown the wind, and now she was reaping the whirlwind. The guests began to murmur, the shock giving way to a flurry of hushed gossip. The scandal would be the talk of the city for months. Julian ignored them all. He walked over to Elena, who stood amidst the wreckage of Isabel's life, looking shaken but resolute. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice filled with a genuine concern that melted the last of his corporate armor. She nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek with the back of her hand. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Thank you, Julian. You saved me." "You saved me, Elena," he corrected her, his voice low and earnest. "You reminded me what it means to have character, to have integrity. You woke me up." He saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the strain of the past few weeks culminating in this overwhelming public spectacle. "Let's get you out of here," he said. He led her away from the gawking crowd, through a side door and into the quiet, moonlit gardens. The cool night air was a relief after the stifling atmosphere of the ballroom. They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the gentle splash of a fountain. The chaos inside seemed a world away. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Now," he said, turning to face her. "We begin to fix things." He told her about the foundation he was establishing, a new, legitimate charitable endeavor funded by his personal wealth. It would be dedicated to providing top-tier medical care to families who couldn't afford it, a direct response to the injustice her own family had faced. "I need someone to run it," he said, his gaze intense. "Someone with compassion, with integrity. Someone who understands what's at stake." "I need you, Elena," she was stunned into silence. "Me? But I'm a maid. I don't have a degree." "You have a degree in humanity, which is more valuable than any MBA, he countered. "We'll get you the best tutors. You can finish your nursing certification, get a business degree, whatever you need. The foundation will pay for it. All I'm asking is for you to lead it, to be its heart." It was an incredible offer, a complete reversal of her fortune. It was a chance to do for countless others what she had so desperately tried to do for her own sister. It was a purpose, a future she had never dared to dream of. "Yes," she whispered, a real, radiant smile finally breaking through. "Yes, I'll do it." In that moment, under the quiet gaze of the moon, the bond between them solidified. It was no longer about a billionaire and a maid, a protector and a victim. It was about two people who had found in each other a shared sense of justice and a glimmer of hope for a better future. 1 year later, the Blackwood mansion was no longer a cold, sterile museum. Laughter now echoed in the halls where Isabel's cruel whispers once resided. The heavy velvet drapes had been replaced with light, airy curtains that let the sunshine stream in, illuminating dust motes dancing in the warm air. The centerpiece of the grand foyer was no longer an imposing, abstract sculpture, but a large, vibrant painting of a field of sunflowers, painted by a young artist named Lily Vance. Lily, now healthy and thriving thanks to a cutting-edge treatment program funded by the new foundation, had discovered a passion for art during her recovery. Her once pale cheeks were now full of color, her eyes bright with the boundless optimism of youth. Her transformation was a living testament to the foundation's work. Elena was no longer the invisible maid. She was the respected and formidable director of the Lily Vance Foundation for Family Healthcare. She had completed her nursing degree with top honors and was now pursuing a graduate degree in nonprofit management, all while overseeing the distribution of millions of dollars in medical grants. She moved with a confidence and purpose that had always been there, but was now allowed to shine. She had traded her simple gray uniform for smart, professional attire, but she still possessed the same quiet dignity, the same unshakable integrity. Julian was a changed man. The hollow, disconnected CEO was gone. He had delegated much of the day-to-day operations of his company to a trusted board, choosing to focus his energy on the foundation alongside Elena. He had found that building a legacy of compassion was infinitely more fulfilling than building one of steel and glass. He smiled more, laughed freely, and the permanent sadness that had once haunted his eyes had been replaced by a warm, steady light. Isabel was a distant memory, a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. After a very public trial, she was convicted of fraud and embezzlement and was serving a lengthy prison sentence. Her name, once synonymous with high society, was now synonymous with disgrace. Her creditors had been paid, and she had been left with nothing. One sunny afternoon, Julian found Elena in the garden, the same garden where he had first asked for her trust. She was sitting on a stone bench, reviewing grant applications on a tablet. He sat down beside her, not saying a word, simply enjoying the comfortable silence between them. "We just approved the funding for a new pediatric wing at the city hospital," she said, looking up at him, her eyes shining. "Lily's doctor is going to head the new research department." "That's wonderful," he said, his voice filled with pride. "You built that, Elena?" "We built it," she corrected him gently, placing her hand over his. Their relationship had blossomed slowly, naturally, out of a deep well of mutual respect and admiration. It was a partnership in every sense of the word. He looked at her, at the incredible woman who had endured so much and had turned her pain into a force for good. He thought of the first time he saw her, on her hands and knees, refusing to be broken. She had not only saved herself and her sister, she had saved him from a life of empty wealth and profound loneliness. "I love you, Elena Vance," he said, the words feeling more real and true than anything he had ever said before. "I love you too, Julian Blackwood," she replied, her smile as bright as the sunshine filtering through the leaves. He leaned in and kissed her, a gentle, promising kiss that spoke of a shared future, of a home built not on marble and money, but on kindness, justice, and love. What is the true measure of a person's worth? Is it the wealth they accumulate, or the good they put into the world? For Julian and Elena, the answer was beautifully, perfectly clear.